Welcome to On the Edge. My guest today is a seasoned executive with over 35 years in software engineering, product management, and marketing. He has driven successes for startup companies and Fortune 500 companies alike, with the focus on education, healthcare, and media. Currently, he serves as the Vice President of Product at What If Media Group, is a board member of the Harold Hunter Foundation, and most importantly, he is my boss and CEO of Edge Media Network. Please welcome to the program, David Foucher. Hola, hola, amigo, ¿qué tal?
Hola, hola, I'm here at last. I'm so excited.
You're here at
I
last
finally
on your own
heard the
show.
series myself. What?
You're here at last on your own show.
I know. It's very exciting for me. I don't normally get to be on camera, so it's kind of exciting.
Well, interesting fact. The reason, for the audience, the reason we're having this interview today is because 2024 marks the 20th anniversary of Edge Media Network. Meaning, good God, you've been around since dirt.
I know. I still look the same though. It's amazing.
Right?
Yeah, the network doesn't.
That's right. I came along and changed everything.
Yeah, we've come a long way in 20 years, I have to say. Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
Very true, very true. Well, let's take it back, okay? Let's take it all the way back, not so far as the late 1900s, but...
Okay, wasn't actually there then.
Yeah.
Same.
Let's go back to the early 2000s.
Okay.
So
yeah.
2000 through 2010, right? You are, at this point, you're probably out of college. And yeah, because we're about the same age. So you're out of college and you're in your career world.
Yep.
You're doing your thing. You're a young gay man working it out in Boston, which is where they're located out of. And, all of a sudden you decide, what made you decide to create an online presence for LGBTQIA queer media?
I think part of it was that I was just bored at work, and part of it was that I live in Boston, and we had a couple of local LGBTQ newspapers here, but it was early days in the internet still, and they had not migrated online, and it was fairly frustrating because I'd moved a little bit out of the city, and yet there was no place for me to pick up those newspapers, no easy location for me to get to, so I wrote to the publishers of both of those papers and I begged them to get their news on the web, which is what, at that time, this was 2003, 2004, most media companies, of moderate size had migrated at least part of their news to the web. So it was frustrating not being able to read news about our community without having to travel significantly to pick up a physical newspaper. So when I wrote to them, I said, I will work for free. I don't care what I need to do. I just want to be able to read about our community on the internet as opposed to having to look for paper. Weeks went by and I get no response from them. So I kind of got frustrated and I banded together with a couple of like-minded individuals, several of whom were working at the time for local Boston newspapers. And we just decided to do it ourselves because no one was listening, and we found a gap in the market, and we thought, hey, let's see what we can do to sort of cover that.
It's funny you say that. The transition from print to digital. I was around during this time in existence, and I used to be an old print girl, as I like to say. And even I tried to migrate my companies to the web, and I got a lot of pushback from community, right? Did you have any type of experience
from the community
with that?
itself? Interesting. Yeah. So we did at the beginning. There really were two camps. There were the readers who were very excited about what we were doing. We got 60,000 of them in pretty short order in Boston itself, which is a lot of community members in one city. And they were very excited about what we'd started and what we were starting to do. It was harder to get the business community. At the time, there was a lot of nightlife that we were sort of trying to bring on the platform because at the time that was a big draw, right? What was going on at nightlife, what was going on at the clubs or the bars at certain times. But they were resistant. And I remember a very interesting in our first year, we also expanded to Provincetown, Massachusetts, and I went down there with my sales guy at the time, and we were going door to door and talking to people about it. And the general reaction we got was really well framed by one of the individuals we talked to, who said point blank to us that the internet was the devil. So it was a little challenging at the beginning to get a lot of the community to play along, but we did ultimately get there. I think the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and things have changed so drastically, both in queer media and the community as a whole. Tell me what you think about like the changes we've gone through in all that vast 20-year period of time.
It's been astronomical. Gay rights has moved significantly. We started up just as the Supreme Court was starting to deliberate over the gay marriage question. And that was decided a few months after we had started the magazine in Boston. But before that, Mass Equality was here trying to get marriage moving in Massachusetts. And we were the first in the country to actually legalize that. And so we'd started up right when this entire conversation started to really hit high gear. So it was a heady time for gay rights at that point. In the subsequent 2 decades, I can't believe the progress that the community has actually made. And it's been in fits and starts and advances and retreats, right? So we've had retreats along the way. The Trump, presidency was by and large a retreat. But even after that, there's been a lot of blowback regarding pride. You see it in the larger brands. No progress is a straight line. I've always felt like the community is moving in the right direction, but it's also been subject to, an increased level. As we've come out of the closet, so is the hate, so is the intolerance. It's been pretty dramatic to watch the fits and starts over the last 20 years. Simultaneously, the culture has changed really astronomically. Gay nightlife is not certainly what it used to when you and I first came out of the closet. Kids are more integrated with their, straight and, bisexual and transgender counterparts. There's not as much need for safe spaces at this point. When we were going out, that was the big draw of those nightclubs and the bars. Less of that these days, but also, there's just more acceptance. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she fluctuates between, am I straight and am I bisexual? That was not something that you heard about in 2004 when we started out. When you were coming out of the closet in 2004, it was still dramatic to tell your parents. These days, parents are dealing with that when kids are 8. So, the entire world has changed underneath our feet, and it's been challenging for the media space. It's been challenging with technology coming around. A lot of our local newspapers, the LGBT local newspapers, have died on the vine. And we have a mission here to sort of help with that as well. But it doesn't mean that there isn't, still a tremendous amount of intolerance and frustration with the larger community and our community sort of finding ways to balance living together.
You mentioned that progress isn't a straight line, and it's not. It's all over the place. Now, I know, and I want you to tell our audience a little bit about your humble beginnings, how you, like I, started my media company in my house.
Oh, yeah.
And how was that for you? Like, all of a sudden you have employees in your house every day, and you're having to hide things every morning, the dirty things. And
oh, yeah, we had that.
If you had a guest over, get out, the employees are coming, Tell me a little about that experience.
When we started, I remember getting a phone call in a restaurant. I was out having dinner with my partner at the time, and a phone call came about as far as one of our creatives has actually said, they wanted to join what we were trying to do. And I sat down, I got the phone call outside, I sat down back to dinner, and I said to him at the time, I said, are you sure you want me to go for this? You really want me to do this? I said, because it's going to take over our lives. It's just that we're not going to be able to escape this. To his credit, he said yes, and he's still in the company now, 20 years later. He was our employee number 1. It was really challenging at the beginning. We didn't know, a lot of us weren't in media at the time. I was a writer and a graphic designer, but I hadn't really, none of us had started up a newspaper before. So, we sort of had to punt. And it was also a brand new, doing it online and building out databases and design that would actually work for an online newspaper was a very different set of skills required than, your layout artist in print. So everybody had to like invent something new. And so we did that by meeting once a week. I lived in a condo in the south end of Boston, and, a small group, it was probably 10 to 12 of us on a weekly basis, met there every single week. When we started really getting to the point where people were full-time, we hosted individuals in our home. We sort of cleared out bedrooms and put in desks, and everybody worked there. There were those times when, we found, everything from drug abuse to, alcohol abuse in our offices, which was always challenging. I mean, but, we got past those moments, and many of those people were able to get through their challenges and contribute productively. But we really, it was very invasive at the beginning. It was in the house all the time. And it took probably 4 to 5 years for that to exit completely, because we just, at some point, you need private space and professional space.
Yeah.
But it was challenging. It was also really fun, I have to say. It was very, very entertaining at the beginning. I remember every Thursday night, we used to send out our weekly newsletters. And at the time, these more advanced solutions that are out now for sending out e-blasts and so forth weren't even there. So we were hand sending those things at the beginning, hand coding and hand sending those. And so every Thursday night we'd be up until like 11 o'clock or midnight, trying to get the weekly e-blasts out. It was a lot more hand coded work than it is now. So it was quite an evolution.
You mentioned that, there's always challenges in building a company and whatnot. I know that when I was building my first company, because of its success, came a lot of notoriety in my own public sphere. And I know you've had that. I've been up to Boston for company meetings and such. Did you ever have a time where you felt like your own audience and your own community, whether they be gay or straight, were now then, oh my God, this is now a threat to my own happiness and like freedom? For example, I published an article one time and then I ended up getting death threats. So yeah. I had to have FBI living in my house for a while because it was done through the internet. Did you ever run into any of that type of situation?
In a milder scenario. Yeah. I also live in Massachusetts. So if there's a more liberal state of the union, I don't know what it is. But there have been times, at the beginning, I was also very active writing. Most of what I was doing was film reviews, but every once in a while I dip into politics and so forth. There were 2 circumstances that come to mind. One was when I was actually getting married after it was legalized. So a couple of years after we started, my partner and I decided to get married. And, we were getting married at Boston University, and I had to go to the administration and say, I just need you guys to be aware that we have, a series of people who sound like they're going to picket our marriage, so, and I didn't want that invading that day. So we had to make plans to sort of hide the location of that. I was blogging at the time, right? The entire experience, because it was very early in the gay marriage game. But I was very cautious not to give away the location. So we hid that. We made sure that, Boston University was aware of the fact that there could be picketers, and they were so gracious. They were like, oh no, we'll get them out of here. Don't worry. They were so supportive. So, nothing actually materialized on that one, but I felt a little bit invaded. The other one was really, there were times when we would do exposés of companies in our space, who we felt were mistreating gays. And one of those was a large social network, that was very popular at the time. And they'd moved into an advertising model where they were basically selling, individuals based on their sexuality, how they identified inside the social network. And, we considered that to be an abuse of privacy and also very dangerous to members of our community who would self-identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender inside the social network. And clearly that was not, they didn't want that information to be sold to advertisers. So we did a pretty big expose of that company at the time. And got a lot of blowback personally and corporately. But for every one of those stories, we have 10 of individuals or corporations or groups of individuals who were incredibly supportive. I can't tell you how much fan mail we've received over the years, including we've received a significant number of fan mail at the beginning of our venture from prison, where prisoners would write to us and thank us for making news available on the web, because I guess somehow they were able to access it inside their prison, but they couldn't get newspapers. So they were finally able to actually follow what was happening in the community without hearing from friends and relatives who happen to be visiting them. So, for every bad story, there's been 10 good ones. So on the whole, we feel like over the years, we've been incredibly supported.
Good. Because, as you know, media in general is a hard industry, but then you bring it into scope of a specific demographic that's even more challenging, not just for your content and audience, but also for advertising and business.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, you had to learn the advertising business as you went along. Full disclosure, same here. And you learn a lot of things about companies and businesses. Tell me about your growth from, let's say, the 2010s up through the 2020s. Tell me about the growth of Edge and how, you went from online really well known in Boston, but now, poof, you're national.
It was an interesting evolution. And what we thought was going to work at the beginning wasn't necessarily the equation that worked in the end. So we had thought we were going to really focus on localized news. And in doing that, we made two mistakes. Number one is that on the internet, there's a very different economy, what we call economy of scale, for revenue. So, advertisers want to see, your average advertiser in a local newspaper is a local business. And they tend to get thrilled by just seeing their ad there. It's visual. They can tell that people are picking up and reading the newspaper. They don't really track return on investment that strongly. It's hard to do that unless you actually have a coupon or something. So on the online world, it's dramatically different. The economies of scale are different. One reader in a newspaper equates to 1,000 or 10,000 readers online that you've got to get in order to make the same amount of revenue. And that's just because of the way advertising works on the internet. It's much more challenging. So a lot of these local newspapers struggled in the 2010s, between 2010 and 2020, to make that shift. And clearly, advertising revenue was moving off the newspaper, off of print to some degree, especially in the local ones. Some of the larger brands that we have out in Advocate and so forth continue to be productive. But the lower end, those companies that were largely had lower audiences, smaller audiences, really struggled. We saw a number of them really die out. And that was, we felt like trying to emulate that online was not going to be a productive model, if only because we didn't want to go into these locations and force newspapers out of business. That was not our model. Our model was to be good model citizens in the gay community, not trash all the newspapers that were there. So we did two things. We refocused. We went more for a national focus, but we did it in our own Edge style. Our Edge style has always been sort of part witty and sarcastic, part news oriented, and a lot of entertainment. And so we brought that out nationally, and that really spun the wheel. That got us, a tremendous readership. And we also worked with local newspapers. We had built quite a technological system to deliver news online. And we had also built networking between our different portals, so our different cities. And so we turned that into a business model for local newspapers. And so, if you read the Bay Area Reporter online right now, you're reading it on Edge Technologies. The solution is entirely theirs. We don't charge them for it. We basically, have a relationship with the Bay Area Reporter that says, we're going to be your technological partner, and we're interested in this because we want local news to survive. And occasionally they will run stories across our network. So you'll occasionally read a Bay Area Reporter story that we found really important and they've sent to us. And so it sort of helps everybody. And we realized during this period of time that instead of trying to be competitive with other media in our space, we try to be complementary. And I think that really worked in our favor. We also, during that period, built the first gay news mobile app. And that was quite an evolution. At the beginning, it was funny because I had a back injury and I was on I remember this was in that period sometime. And I was basically on the couch for 3 months or something like that because I couldn't get up. And I was on heavy drugs, from the medical establishment. And so I taught myself, I was so bored, I taught myself how to code for the iPhone. And that was right when, all the technology came out, the App Store was launched and so forth. So the first thing I built, I was working at MIT at the time. So we eventually took the technology there. But at that time, I was like, well, let me just build the first app for Edge. And that really took off. I was so surprised. It was, I think back in that day, just being able to read news on a phone. I mean, that was something besides just being at your desk and being able to catch up on news. You could get it wherever you go. You could download the stories and read them on the subway. And, back then we didn't have hotspots everywhere. So having the ability to download your news and read it, I mean, it took off. It was very, very big with the community. And we really grew astronomically as a result of getting into some of these technological spheres very early. And that comes from, I think, being a really interesting group where there's a lot of writers and photographers and videographers and creative folk and graphic designers and so forth in our stable. But on the other side, we have a large technological group. Our engineering department is probably larger than anybody's in this space. And so we are constantly innovating on new technological ways to get news and entertainment information out to our community, and being able to share that with local newspapers and other news sources. I think it's sort of like raises all boats, right? So everybody gets better the more we share news, because at the end of the day, our community relies on the share of information to be able to do what we need to do socially and politically. And, if we strike down and we only have a couple of those brands out there, we're going to struggle more. And having local news is really important. The grassroots that occurs in our type of community happens largely at the grassroots level. It has to be a local effort first. So watching, communities spin up local prides and, the smallest little prides in these communities that are getting together families where they weren't and all the rest of it. All of this feels like, we weren't necessarily responsible for all of that, but we were certainly part of the equation that made all this possible. And that's a source of pride for us.
That's good, as it should be. I mean, Edge has been around for 2 decades. You have actually, as you mentioned, for every bad story, you have 10 good stories that you've helped people with and done things. You've gone through challenges. You've also gone through major successes, which is great. One thing I don't think an audience member would quite understand is how hard the business model is. I know that like in 2008, when the housing crisis happened, I know my old company, we actually succeeded during that time. And we grew during that time because it was an interesting thing in advertising. At that time, 2008, advertisers from big to small were reconsidering how they're advertising. And at that time, they would say, okay, maybe we don't just spend a ton of money in a blanket marketing campaign that goes out to general audiences. Let's be more specific. Let's do LGBTQ+, let's do African American, let's do Indian, let's do Hispanic. And they really broke down. So we were successful in that. You had mentioned earlier in the show today about how throughout the Trump years, we've started to get some backlash a little bit. And we've had a few advertisers be like, let's hold up for a minute before we do anything. And that can become a scary situation for a business owner. It can also become a scary situation, which I personally think is a little hypocritical for advertisers to our audience, right? Like they're like, oh, we want to advertise with you as long as you guys are good and not getting in trouble. But the second like somebody doesn't like you, oh, we're going to pull our advertising. So tell me about some of the challenges and how you overcame those aspects.
Advertisers and advertising agencies for that matter, because a lot of them go through the agencies, are a skittish lot. They're very susceptible to the whims of the consumer base, and that consumer base changes its tune regularly. It is shocking to me sometimes how quickly these things occur. The backlash last year in 2023, I guess, right, where a lot of brands were boycotted, Bud Light because of the trans issue, and then Target, for example, as a result of showing Pride gear too close to their stores in some of these communities. those sort of boycotts send advertisers running for the door. That is not unusual, and it's not really the advertiser's fault. Let's be clear about this. We want our advertisers, we want our brands to stand up for us, and in most part, they do. The fact that Target put out that much Pride, merchandise is a victory for our community. The fact that Pride is becoming more mainstream as we go. To have them pull back for a moment because there were boycotts, that is a natural reaction to a spin in the community that needs to be tracked and offset by individuals in our community. Again, it goes to the point of communication. If we didn't share that story and have a whole bunch of people support Bud Light or support Target as a result of those boycotts, then we would be missing an opportunity to teach those brands what really matters in the world, right? Equality, justice, those things that are so important to us. So, it's a pause from their point of view. We sort of worked with them and said, okay, look, it's okay. We get it. There are a lot of brands that pulled back. But it always cycles back. Progress, again, is always moving forward, sometimes in fits and starts, sometimes with detours left and right. So you can't control it. The best thing you can do is, as I always say, is work through it. And most brands, when you talk about recessions, there's been a very weird period here post-virus. Everybody expected the virus to lead to a recession. The recession was incredibly short. The amount of stimulus that was dumped into the economy as a result of that created the reverse of a recession, really. Most media had a really decent ride during some of the most difficult periods for consumer bases. Usually when there's a recession, we do pretty well. It's been very, very strange. But we're not the only ones who get a vote. We do our best. Every media company, I'm sure in our space, is doing their best. We sort of find out the stories that we think are most important. We mix them in with lighthearted and funny stuff and, salacious content that everybody wants to read. And we publish that out in the technological platforms that we feel are the most important at the time. That's the most any company can do. We have a large audience that's looking to us. Our goal is to satisfy that audience. If the advertisers have, washed away temporarily for that, we have no choice but to continue. And that is why we run our business as smartly as we can. We always make sure that we're on good financial ground. We don't have debt. And that allows us to sort of blow through the hard time, because the last thing you want to do is lay off people. I mean, in the history of our company, I don't believe we've laid off more than one or two people. And that's 20 years. I think it's really important for a company like ours to have that historical, sensibility that most of our staff goes all the way back 20 years. At least half our staff has been here since pretty much the beginning of the company. So they've seen the ups and downs. They know what this stuff looks like. And so when we hit a turbulent spot in the market, we're pretty calm about it at this point in time. We know it's going to turn. We know we're going to get through it. But it's equally important during these periods, especially as we see, the biggest shift right now that's happening is social media is turning away from news content, largely because they're afraid of it. There's a feeling that content was responsible for political abuses during the last few election cycles and so forth. So, social media has basically turned a blind eye to news. You're not going to see it in the feed anymore. And it's really important to offset, those individuals who are out on some of these social media platforms, particularly TikTok, putting out news that isn't really vetted or really doesn't have any basis in fact. We see that all the time out there, particularly in marginalized communities like the queer community. And so it's really important to continue to prop up our most cherished media establishments. We need, we're in a small group with a number of very important local and national players. And people ask me all the time, are you in competition with, the Queerties and the
Out Advocates?
Out Navigate, or local newspapers like Bay Area Reporter, or the a lot. There's a lot of these newspapers out there that we've worked with in the past. And it's important for our community to keep propping them up, keep visiting their websites, keep picking up the newspaper. It shows advertisers that as a community we are continued to be interested in news, so that we can continue to move our social and political ball down the field. And so when people go to these solutions, advertisers follow. That's how it works. If we turn away from our media properties, then those media properties are going to die on the vine. And then as a community, we're going to be a little bit lost.
Well, that is something I have thought about in time, future of queer media. We are very fortunate at Edge to have been around for 20 or 2 decades, 20 years, 20 years and 2 decades, and creating and building and growing. Where do we go? Where does queer media, not just us, in general, where does queer media go?
I wish I had a crystal ball, and I wish I could tell you the answer. Because
You did though.
Yeah.
With pivoting everything to the web and early on. You are our guru.
Yeah, and it's really about keeping abreast of what's going on in the world from a not from a socio-political point of view, but from a technological and from a media point of view. And it's interesting. We have people in our company and in our space whose primary responsibility is to follow the socioeconomic and political stories. That's our editorial group. That's what they do every day. For a lot of the rest of us, we're also following the media landscape and understanding where advertisers are moving and where technology is moving. The advent of artificial intelligence that has just come around since pretty much November of last year with OpenAI. This is something that we follow very, very closely. And we use AI in our company already. We use it editorial. We also use it technologically. Our coders use AI tools to make their code, write their code faster. So every time, an innovation in the world comes out, we're always looking at it and trying to figure out, if we're not looking at it from the point of view of what does this mean to our readers, right, in their lives as, socioeconomic, political beings, but also what does that mean in terms of our business, right? Can we use these new tools? Are they an existential threat to us? Because sometimes, technology comes out that could be that. AI could be an existential threat for gay media. But at this point in time, we look at those things, we say, yeah, certainly not yet on the AI front. But we're always sort of looking at where's the next thing? What can we do a little bit better? Where can we put our news where it's in front of the individuals, where they want it to be? That's what got us into mobile apps in the first place, because we knew everybody had a phone, and we said they really are going to want to read news there, right? So, there's so much that's coming out, from headsets to, complete VR to, this AI stuff that's working its way through the wires now. There's always movement in the ecosystem in which we all live. It's important for us to be able to read those tea leaves as early as possible to remain competitive. And then the benefit that we bring is that we then shuttle that out to our partners as well, so they don't have to spend the same egregious amount of money and time researching and developing those solutions. So it's been, it's quite a challenge, always looking out, sort of trying to figure out where things go next. And we don't always get that right. I don't think anybody does. But what we do, what we will always continue to do, is try to innovate. We're always trying something new. We're always investigating a new way of getting information out to our community. And that's the only thing we can do. We only get a third of the vote. The advertisers get the other vote, and the readers get the other vote. So all we can do is our best, and keep doing that as long as we can.
Something that our audience probably doesn't know about, but I've always thought was very innovative, is we actually have 2 divisions of Edge Media.
Yeah.
We have Edge Media, which does our website and produces things like this show, but we also have another department called Pride Labs. And you developed that many years ago when you were learning how to code apps and things like that. And you went to different Pride festivals and different organizations said, hey, let me make an app for you. And you did that. And you created this network, which we now call Pride Labs. And And I want you to explain a little bit about what that department does, as well as give it a pitch, girl. If there's somebody watching that needs some help, let's hear it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting side of our business. So we broke off our technology group and called them Pride Labs. And that was easily 10 years ago. I can't remember exactly when we started that, but they're entirely bent towards technological solutions for the LGBTQ community. And, in the past that has been mobile apps. It's always been websites. We do email, we're getting into SMS, and we're also a little bit into performance marketing at this point. So it's a pretty wide suite of tools that we offer to literally any business in our community. Now, we obviously specialize in news. So some of the early adopters have been, as we mentioned, some of those local newspapers for whom we drive their websites and so forth. And the benefit of our technology is it all connects together. So if business owner A in California and business owner B in Atlanta are both on the system, they can actually route stories and events and content to each other's solutions. There's always protective measures, so you can only accept the stuff that you want to publish on your solution. But it does mean that, we have a marketing vehicle that's baked into a communication vehicle, which is really interesting. I mean, we've been, working to get that off the ground for a significant amount of time, and we see quite a lot of people engaging with those solutions. So it's really nice to see, when we bring up a website for a local business, when we bring up a website or a mobile app for a newspaper, it's really heartening to see their traffic continue to grow and people get more invested in their solutions. And then there's this partnership with each other. So it's been really great. So the solutions we bring to market are obviously native mobile apps, and latest generation websites. And by that, I mean, we don't code websites like they were coded even 4 years ago. Our technology is consistently on the move. So we use the latest, greatest technologies. This is incredibly hard for local businesses to do. And believe me, we know, we've been doing this for 20 years, so we know how hard it is to keep up technologically. We have a large group of engineers that do that, and then we float that out to our partners. And 99% of the time, it's free. It's literally free. So it's not complicated to get going. Any local LGBTQ oriented business, they don't have to be owned by LGBTQ individuals, but if they're targeted to the community, then this is something that they can jump onto, and it's probably going to be free for them. And we become their technological partner. Everybody always asks me, how in the hell do you do that? Because, how are you possibly making money with that and so forth? So we have some partners that do pay, and that is because they want advanced services or et cetera. That tends to pay a lot for the program. The other thing we tend to do is, we'll put advertisements on some of these other solutions, and that offsets our costs because that is our primary methodology of business. So if a business is not in the way of, putting advertisements, we can put queer-oriented advertising on their platform. We get a little bit of money. They get free technology. It all sort of works out really well in the end. It's not for everybody. We recognize that, but we're there if a company or a media company, anybody from a lawyer's office to a dentist. I mean, we're there to sort of help any of our, community members get into more of a technological game. Because I think, again, I go back to the, rising water floats all boats. The more technological our community is, the more we're using these latest and greatest communication tools, including things like AI, which we're building into our platforms. The more we do that, the more up to date and competitive we become with those who are trying to take us down. There's always detractors, there's always hate, there's always intolerance. We have to fight that on every level we can. This is one of the ways that we chose.
Well, what I like is that if you are a company and you do decide to utilize Pride Lab service, as you mentioned, you become a part of what? The network, right? Media network. And I love the fact that, yes, like you mentioned, somebody in Atlanta can share a story, or somebody. You even mentioned a lawyer, a gay law firm. What if there's a story on Edge or from Bay Area Reporter that is very pertinent to queer law and things? They can utilize that article on their site, which is great. That's what community building is. I'll be honest, when I first kind of started thinking about the web, I was nervous because I'm like, you're not physically with people. Just like, back in the late 1900s when we went to the gay bars, we were with people.
Yeah.
And now we're not. We are, but we're not. And
Yeah.
one of my fears was that, just like the gay bar, many have depleted. Gay media, many have depleted. We as a brand have stood strong, which is amazing. And, we want to be the guiding light for the future for us. And I think the networking aspect of that does really help with us a lot.
Yeah, I think it's easier when businesses and people in general, but businesses in particular, band together.
Yeah.
I think that becomes an easier ride for everybody. So we've always tried to be a good partner to other businesses, and that includes what you're describing as building a network that allows people to promote, inform, members of the community through whatever vehicle they can. So it's a perfect example. If you've got his doctor's office, we used to have a doctor do a, ask the doctor column for us. And that doctor would just put it on their platform, roll it across the Edge network. We would pick it up and boom, they had an immediate audience and it was huge. So, great ideas are blooming everywhere. People in our community are incredibly resourceful. They're incredibly creative. They've usually seen a significant amount of oppression to some degree in their lives. So they've had to become better in order to offset that, in order to live through that and survive. So they've got great stories to tell. We've always felt that at Edge, that the stories that the average member of the community, I don't know how many times I've seen a Madonna interview. I don't think I need to see any more. We did that. Now we're interested in more stories about average individuals doing uncommon or interesting things. Every business owner in this community is doing something remarkable. And being able to tell their story, that's something that I find remarkable. So if we can be part of that, evolution, I think it's part of our existing mission of just getting the news out. I think that's part of it. And so it's a little bit of a weird flex, as some people have pointed out to us over the years, like, okay, are you a technology company or are you a media company? And I say, yes, we're both. Because I don't think in this day and age, you can have one without the other. It just doesn't work anymore. And so many media companies that were left behind in the digital transformation, they've suffered tremendously. So being able to get their stories out again is, I think, an incredibly valuable thing for us and for our community.
That's wonderfully put. David? Oh, somebody's dinging us. Haha.
Sorry,
That's okay. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with me today and chit chat about the history of the fabulous company, which I love, and I'm so thankful to be here.
We have to thank our readers too, honestly. Yeah. Without you guys watching these stories and visiting us on a regular basis, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. We wouldn't be able to survive. So we really, really appreciate every single time someone reads a story. We celebrate you guys for being with us. So thank you all so much for your continued patronage. We appreciate it.
If you want to get more information to David about what's going on in the world or want to find out more about Pride Labs, you can always contact him at Dave F, DAVEF, at edgemedianetwork.com. David, thank you again so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And
thank you, Darren.
We'll continue making fabulousness.
We'll do our best. Thank you, everyone.
And for you, audience, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you learned a little bit about the brief history of this 20-year legacy queer media entity we have in the United States. If you want to find out more about Edge Media Network, of course, you can go to all of our social platforms, which is Edge Media Network. And if you want daily queer content, go to our website, edgemedianetwork.com. Until next time, thanks a lot.